I think it's fair to say this is the largest audience I've ever had to speak to. So I want to welcome everybody. I really appreciate you all dealing with the weather and the parking and still making it here for lunch. That's fantastic. Love the commitment. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome you and wish you a happy Black History Month. So late last month, I had the opportunity to participate in a listening session with Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who was here representing President Biden. A small group of about 12 of us was gathered around a conference table to hear the congressman tick off key talking points from the Biden agenda and also to answer his questions about issues on the ground. One of the preeminent issues on the ground is always messaging. Frequently, we seem to have lucid moments when we recognize that our messages don't really work, but then we turn right around and dish out more of the same. Familiar with that, right? The major difference I see between Republicans and Democrats is that can be pointed to as a reason for their electoral success, is that Republicans are the monolith that Democrats refuse to be. Ask any Republican what their top 5 issues are, and I bet these 3 will be among them. Say them with me. The economy. Any Republican, right? The economy, the border, and national debt. There's a couple others in there too, of course, but yes, I do understand that grocery prices are high, but the economy is really booming on nearly every metric, including for the last 2 quarters, wage increases outpacing inflation, which is down 6% year over year. The closest border location to us is Reynosa, Mexico, which is 1,298 miles away. And the national debt was increased by $8.4 trillion by who? Right. So Mr. Orange. Yeah. In fact, if you look at historical economic stats, there's a real pattern to be discerned. This is really pretty complicated economics, but try to stay with me. Republicans screw up the economy. Democrats come in and fix the economy. And then another Republican who suddenly panicked about the debt we're leaving our kids gets reelected or gets elected. And so it goes in a cycle on and on and on. Republicans want desperately to have a balanced federal budget. Even in state houses, this is a hot topic. But ask yourself, or more importantly, ask your Republican elected officials, who is the only US president to ever have had a balanced budget? Thank you. And who's the only US president to ever have left office with a budget surplus? Clinton. So, but there's no such equanimity among Democrats. From reproductive rights, voting rights, student debt, all the things you shouted out before, affirmative action, LGBTQ rights, climate, wages. You know, we're everywhere. We have a lot of policy issues. And yet we insist on believing that the secret to electoral success is to find that one message, that one nugget that is going to resonate with all these different constituents. So I'm going to try one out on you today. What kind of America do you want to live in? I want to live in a country where my elected officials at all levels recognize that they are public servants, not rulers. And where once elected, they serve all their constituents, not just their voters. I want to live in a country, a state, or a county where hard work matters and where people can pull themselves up, but also one understands that at some point in everyone's life, someone can need a helping hand. And it doesn't make them lazy bottom feeders. I want to live in a country that respects our differences as being our strengths. I want to live in a country that values all human life. I would like to live in a country where citizens accept responsibility for their actions. Republicans always say that, like somehow or other, half the country doesn't do that. But also that we recognize and repair broken systems, such as education lending, equal pay, livable minimum wage, and affordable housing. I just want to talk for a quick second about college debt. When most of the lawmakers in this state or in Congress were in college, the cost of a four-year education was $29,824. The average age of these legislators being in the mid to late 50s. Today, averaging in public, in-state, out-of-state, and private college, a four-year education is going to cost you $145,270. Things have changed, fellas. At the First in the Nation dinner, Representative Clyburn wrote a letter from one South Carolinian who had taken out a $65,000 college loan. I can't remember how long he's been paying it, but he has paid out $300,000. And he still has $100,000 to go. That is a broken system that needs to be fixed. I want to live in a country that respects the past, but is preparing for the world that will be, not the world that was. I want to live in a country where the backbone of our electoral process, poll workers, many of whom I'm sure are in this room today, are never afraid to do their duty, never threatened, never their lives or livelihood are at risk. These values translate from the highest office in the land to municipal and state offices as well. Certainly, our state electeds don't vote on military budgets or foreign entanglements, but they make decisions every day that show us their values. It's our Republican state legislators who have saddled us with a 6-week abortion ban that puts the lives of potentially tens of thousands of women at risk. It's our Republican state legislators who choose not to improve public education, but to redirect your tax dollars to send a small number of kids to private, often religious schools. It's our Republican state legislators who crow about all the road and bridge construction going on in the state, and the big technology businesses that are coming to South Carolina, without ever once mentioning that those projects are largely funded by federal money from the Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS and Science Act. Two bills that not a single one of our South Carolina Republican representatives voted. It's state electeds like Governor Nassar who are proud to announce that they will not take any federal money to feed needy children in the summer. But they're happy to take $4.9 billion in infrastructure funding from that very same government. They're happy to have high-tech semiconductor businesses moving into the state, lured by large federal contracts and potential investments. What does that tell us? They value businesses, but not people. The specific examples may change from the federal to the state and the municipal level, but the values they exhibit do not. This cycle, we're going to have another shot at telling our Republican ruling class that we are tired of their brand of bad government, that their 20-year gravy train is reaching the end of the track. Will this be the year that we in Greenville County can flip one damn seat? I think it can be. A big part of flipping that one damn seat is leadership. We need you to be active participants in this election. We have 151 precincts in Greenville County, and just 34% of them have any kind of leadership at all. Being a precinct leader doesn't have to be hard, but it does have to be intentional. It's a commitment to talk to your neighbors, to pass out literature, to let them know when and where to vote, to answer their questions. If that's a commitment you think you might be willing to make, please plan to attend the GCDP County Convention on March 2nd. It's going to be at the Phyllis Wheatley Center. County party officials at 1:30. County party officials, precinct leaders, and state convention delegates will be elected. If you, like me, are tired of being this angry, This is the way to start making a difference. Contact the party and find out if your precinct is one of the many that don't have leadership. There's a pretty good chance there are gonna be some open seats. The worst thing that can happen to you by getting involved with your precinct is that you get to know your neighbors better. The best thing, the best case is that you play a crucial role in flipping that one damn seat. Just a few quick things that came up during last month's open mic discussion that I wanted to run through really fast before we get to the reason why you're all here, which is not to hear me. Helen, we had an open mic discussion. Helen Nixon proposed a member contest that the board discussed, and we really like that idea. We have some details to work out. And we're probably going to start with a quarterly contest, probably in April. The prize will probably be some kind of gift card or donated reward. We have, like I say, we have details, but it's a great idea, and I think it will result in a stronger, more diverse, more energized Democratic women. So that would be members, sign up members, and whoever signs up the most member in that quarter gets a very, very exciting gift card. Lee Turner proposed postcard writing as a regular meeting activity. We like that idea also. There are more moving parts to work out. I definitely think we'll look for opportunities to write postcards as part of advocacy efforts and to support candidates as we move along. So great idea, Lee. Thank you for that. And Elizabeth Ard mentioned building a better relationship with the Hispanic community. This is something we've already started to initiate. The Advocacy and Community Engagement Committee, led by Evelyn Nocella, is looking for volunteers to regularly attend community meetings to help us better understand issues, meet with and engage community members, and develop important relationships that we might not have as strong now. And we're actively looking for DWGC members, that's you guys, who are interested in participating, to reach out to Evelyn and get involved with that. Hopefully we get enough people so we can rotate. You don't have to go to every single meeting, and go to the community meeting that's in your community. But this is something we're really excited about doing. So, Evelyn, everybody knows Evelyn, and that will also be in the post-event email, a link to reach out to her. Okay, so when I first saw how many people were coming, I was really excited because I thought, well, we must be really doing a great job. And then I realized it was probably Mike. Mike Roosevelt worked as an analyst and manager at the CIA for 30 years, retiring in 2015. He was hired for his expertise on the Soviet Union, otherwise known as Donald Trump's best friends. He analyzed the politics of Russia and the other Soviet successor states throughout his career, but also took assignments focused on China, global crime and narcotics, interagency policy, human resources, and was in the Office of the Inspector General. He did policy rotations in the White House and Department of State, and thing I think is the coolest was Vice President Joe Biden's first intelligence briefer after the 2008 presidential election. In retirement, he's just as active. He cycles, he hikes, he reads, he writes, he registers new voters, and builds houses with Habitat for Humanity. He's got a BA in history and French from Furman University and a master's from Penn State in Russian history. So he knows what he's talking about. And I'm really excited that he is here with us today.
Thank you for the Democratic Women of Greenville County for having me here today. Thank you for so many of you braving the elements to show up. Thank you to Laura Haight for having the idea that I should do this talk. And thank you also for making Habitat for Humanity your cause this month. Laura mentioned that I volunteer there once a week or so, and it's a cause that is very dear and near and dear to my heart. And if you go to the event at the Phyllis Wheatley Center, you can do a drive-by of one of the neighborhoods that we're currently building there. We're building, I think, 25 homes, 29. I stand corrected. But it's a really, really impressive organization here in Greenville County. And thank you for contributing to it. Yes, I can. Is that better? Oh, yeah, that's way better. So one disclaimer very quickly. Everything I say here today is my view. I do not reflect the views of the CIA, the federal government, the deep state, the swamp, anybody else. It's all on me. All righty, great. You're laughing, that's good. So first, as a Russian history major, I always feel obligated to begin talks with quote from Marx. Of course, I mean Groucho Marx, who famously said, "Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?" It's a joke, but it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about today, because the whole point of disinformation is to get you to doubt your reality. Okay? You can see it objectively. You can read it. You might have experienced it, but disinformation is trying to convince you that your eyes are lying to you. You are not seeing what you think you see. So let me begin with a couple of definitions. We'll move through that and we'll get into some examples. Excuse me. First thing, information operations. I've got a definition there from the RAND organization out in California. They came up with this in 2020. I will read it so I don't get it wrong. Disinformation, or rather information operations, includes the collection of tactical information about an adversary, as well as the dissemination of propaganda in pursuit of a competitive advantage over an opponent. Let me break that down real quickly. Disinformation isn't just something that gets spewed out on the internet to you. The person creating this disinformation looks very closely at the target, gathers information about it, does a lot of research. Have you heard of the Internet Research Agency? Remember them from 2016? They're still there, and they're ramping up their hiring right now. They target specific audiences and focus their disinformation for those audiences. Thank you, Amanda. Misinformation, big category, false or inaccurate information that is communicated regardless of the intention to deceive. I may inadvertently share some misinformation with you today. It will be completely unintentional. I may tell you something that's wrong, but I don't intend to. What we're really talking about today is disinformation. It's a form of misinformation that is deliberately deceptive. That's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today. Okay? Moving right along. Information operations isn't just the gathering and dissemination of information and disinformation. It is part of a bigger picture. And the way the Russians view it, information ops are part of warfare by other means. That's how the Russians describe it. They see it as a broad piece of conflict, specifically with the West, with the United States. So they see this as not quite mortal combat, but they know that they can't compete in other arenas. Maybe not even compete militarily with NATO, but if they can undermine NATO through cleverly crafted information operations, it levels the playing field a little bit. It's rooted in Russian weakness. You don't do this because you're strong, confident, and powerful. You view the West, and the US in particular, as kind of an existential threat. They're out to get us. They're out to destroy Russia, right? That's the attitude. That's Putin's view. Another definition here, this one from a researcher at the University of Washington, the Jackson School of International Studies. its information operation seeks to undermine not only an adversary's armed forces, but also influence the target population's perceptions in such a way that favors Russian interests. So all that information, disinformation being blasted out on the internet is directed at you, again, to make you doubt your lying eyes. Okay? Putin views this as a zero-sum game. In other words, if we win, he loses, and vice versa. Okay? He sees this as a competition where you can't have a win-win solution. That's why it's so difficult to negotiate sometimes. As part of this zero-sum game, the Russian goal is to undermine or destabilize Western institutions, make us call our values into question. And more to the point, the policies that our government puts forward. So it makes you want to question our foreign policy, which is fine, but it assumes that our foreign policy is corrupt somehow. It makes us lose confidence in our own institutions. Excuse me. As part of this bigger picture, it's a means of, as you battle it out with the West, you're trying to reestablish Russian dominance in the areas around Russia's periphery. So those former states that Laura mentioned earlier that border Russia, they want to reestablish themselves there. That's what's going on in Ukraine right now. They are reestablishing or attempting to reestablish dominance. And finally, they really, really think they belong at the table with the big boys, that they're a great power, damn it. They deserve it to be considered a great power. They don't want the United States dictating the rules of the game around the world. This information is a tradition in Russia that goes way back. Let me give you some examples. Have any of you ever heard of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? I see some hands going up, some heads nodding. A Russian history professor once described this book. He said the Russians wrote the book on anti-Semitism. And he meant it literally in this case. This is a book that was published. Its origins are a little murky, but it was published and disseminated by the Tsar's secret police at the turn of the 20th century. This goes back to at least 1903, a compilation of all the anti-Semitic tropes, stereotypes, and falsehoods that have been out there for decades. Everything is the fault of the Jews, right? Every problem, you can blame it on them. So this has been going on for a long time, and they directed it at Western audiences as well. But it didn't stop there. The Soviets were really good at disinformation. This is Stalin, of course. Here he is. You see a picture of him walking with some comrades in the senior Soviet leadership, taking a little evening stroll along the Moscow River, right in the 30s. 3 or 4 Politburo members there, including the little fella there. First name. His first name eludes me. Yezhov, head of the secret police. Well, if you were in Stalin's leadership, sooner or later, you were going to fall out of favor. So when you fall out of favor and get executed, you become a non-person in the Soviet Union. So what do you do with that pesky picture? You fix it. He did not fall into the Moscow River. He may have ended up, parts of him may have ended up in the Moscow River, but he became a non-person. In subsequent publications of that picture, he was gone. And who's going to tell Stalin, hey, you forgot Yezhov? Not me. Okay. There are thousands, literally thousands of examples of people being removed from history, of stories of history being altered to suit the whims of the leader. Thousands of stories like that. But it didn't stop with the Soviets. The good guys did it too. Remember Mikhail Gorbachev? Remember him? He was going to fix communism. He was going to fix Soviet communism. Remember how he had that big splotchy birthmark on his forehead? Well, not in his official portrait. I mean, at a certain point, it becomes ridiculous. But everybody just kind of went along with it. Okay. And today, here's Putin's contribution to disinformation. So here he is. He's the judo master. He tames wild animals. He's the manly hunter who doesn't need a shirt, apparently. Yes, he does, somebody said. The accomplished horseman. People snap to attention when he enters the room. And by the way, this one's my favorite, actually. He scored 6 goals against professional hockey players. But then he took a victory lap around the rink, and I'm not making this up. They didn't fix this one before it happened. There was a carpet on the edge where the door is into the benches. He was kind of gesturing to his adoring crowd, and he hit the carpet with his skates and face planted. So even all-powerful dictators can have their moments. And that couldn't be edited out, at least not quickly enough. So yeah, it's utterly ridiculous, right? And yeah, it's ridiculous and it's obvious it's effective. If it wasn't effective, they wouldn't do it, right? So why do they do it? Because it diminishes facts. It tears them down. If everything is fake, nothing can be true. And when you diminish facts, it makes it easier to influence public opinion. And in some cases, election outcomes. It's been proven pretty conclusively that Soviet information or Russian, old habits, Russian information operations, disinformation, influenced the outcome of the Brexit vote in England. They take credit for it. They take credit for the 2016 election outcome here. I don't think they ever expected that Trump would win, but that was a bonus. It drives a narrative with well-crafted and targeted messaging. So say you want to target college students. You want to rile them up maybe about what's going on in the Middle East. Easy. You want to target Democrats in red states or blue states. You want to target Republicans, libertarians. You can craft the message to suit the audience. It's easy. And as I said, the Internet Research Agency is still in business and ramping up. One of the things that they do is flood the zone with multiple competing and contradictory scenarios. What do I mean by that? Actually, flood the zone is an expression that Steve Bannon uses. He adds an expletive at the end. You flood the zone with excrement. But that's the point. I'll give you a couple of examples. 2014, remember there was a shoot down of a commercial airliner over Ukraine, right? 2014, Malaysian Air 17 gets shot down over Ukraine. First thing the Russians do, the Ukrainians shot down a commercial airliner. Well, the investigators quickly proved no, it was not the Ukrainians. It was actually a Russian system that had been transported across the border from Russia into the disputed parts of Ukraine just before the shoot down. They proved it conclusively. The Russians said, well, those people aren't affiliated with us. And we still think the Ukrainians did it, or maybe the CIA did it. Blame everything on the CIA or MI6. The point is they gave a dozen competing, contradictory scenarios for what had happened in that shoot down. They were mutually exclusive. They didn't make sense if you put them side by side, but people got so confused and frustrated, they just gave up. The average person who was following the story. Same thing happened a few years later. This is a little more obscure. 2018 in Salisbury, UK. Julian's nodding. He knows what I'm talking about. The Russian secret services tried to assassinate a Russian defector, Sergei Skripal. They got him with a nerve agent, and they got his daughter too. The English police found the two of them unconscious on a park bench in Salisbury. And okay, what happened here? Well, they quickly figured out it was this nerve agent that's associated with Russian assassination attempts. It's been used many times. I think they used it on Alexei Navalny before they put him in prison. So again, the whole thing, we didn't do it, the CIA did it, the Brits did it, some jealous lover did it. It didn't matter if the stories didn't make sense. People got confused. They just threw up their hands and gave up. So flooding the zone, it's a really, really good strategy. The point is, it's much easier to create this garbage, to be on offense, because there's an infinite number of scenarios that you can spin out. And to try to fight that off, it's like Ukrainians trying to shoot down all the drones that the Russians lob at them every single day, right? It's impossible to get all of them. So as quickly as they can, if we defend against one, they can spin out a new variation on that theme. It's really this simple. I'm going to give you a couple of examples now, and all of my examples, it's no accident, as the Russians used to say. It's no accident that I've chosen all of my examples of disinformation from Twitter. Anybody here on Twitter? I'm trying to wean myself off of it, actually. The reason I chose Twitter for my examples is because it is so easy to find garbage on Twitter. It took me about 10 seconds looking at my Twitter feed to find this. Vladimir Putin. Mail-in voting in the United States is bogus. It's a great way of cheating, he says. That makes those elections fraudulent. Noted U.S. elections authority, Vladimir Putin says, mail-in votes are fraudulent. Okay, that's dumb enough that we even have to see that. I guess he's entitled to his opinion. And that's another interesting point that I haven't put up there in a bullet. They use the fact that we have a free and open press to flood the zone with this junk. Okay, so Putin says this, but then it gets amplified by Americans, like cat turd. I'm not making this up. You laugh. Cat turd has 2.3 million Twitter followers. And I got a news flash for you. There are a lot of cat turds. They amplify Putin's message. And then their minions amplify the message even further. Oh, it's a shame that the Russian president has to tell us what we already know, right? And it's infinite. You can't control it. A recent example, very recent, this was, I think I found this maybe the day before I gave the thumb drive with this file to Laura. The Internet Research Agency is active again, and they're targeting the issue of secession and the Texas border, right? It's the hot issue. 10 days ago, this was the #1 issue on social media, in the news, right? The border problem that had to be solved. Well, they're ramping up efforts on that very topic. But that's just one example from 10 days ago. Pick any hot topic you want. Abortion, LGBTQ rights, any of what's going on in Palestine right now. You name it. Any issue, as soon as it becomes hot, becomes fodder for disinformation. How do we combat the threat? Yeah, right. What's the answer? Well, brace for disappointment and frustration. I wish this was the happy ending that you all came for. There are conventional solutions. Fact checking. Fact checking is actually pretty easy to do, but to refer back to a point I made a few minutes ago, it's hard to keep up. That's the frustrating part. So let me give you a good example of a fact check. On Twitter, these stupid polls pop out every single day on right-wing Twitter. Polls about bogus problems, problems that don't exist. Should the Supreme Court block Biden from giving Social Security to illegal immigrants? Thank you. Thank you. Audience participation. Here's a fact check in real time. Carlos Gates, God bless him. This is misinformation designed to bring outrage. Undocumented immigrants do not collect Social Security. Thank you, Carlos. You've put your finger in the dike, right, in that one spot. Unfortunately, it's leaking all over the place. But if he had said disinformation, it would have illustrated my talk perfectly, but close enough. But that's how you fact check. It's just so hard to do. And who's going to do it? Education. I mean, we could teach civics a little better, maybe, in this country. All of the older people in the room are going, yeah, civics. But it's really, I mean, it's critical thinking too, right? We need to teach people how to think critically about what they read. And this is the real pipe dream, eliminating the algorithm that drives what you see on the internet. That's what makes me crazy. Twitter, one of the things that makes me the angriest about Twitter is I've got a feed, but then there's this little tab over on the left that says for you, right? That should be what I want. Wrong. It's all these crazy people spouting these push polls about problems that don't exist. Okay. Less conventional solution. This is one I really like. Anybody know what pre-bunking is? It's a cousin to debunking. Here's an example of it. I love this, and God bless the Biden administration for doing this. Remember, back in 2022, when it looked like the Russians were going to invade Ukraine, the Biden administration started blasting out declassified intelligence that predicted what the Russians' intentions were, what their plans were, what the invasion would look like, and why they were doing it, among other things. A really quick Google search can find this stuff. That put the Russians on their back foot, temporarily. But that's how you use intelligence intelligently. I thought that was a great example of pre-bunking. It's hard to do, but for the really important stuff, I think it's a great solution. What else? I found these on Twitter again because, as I said, it's easy. Just as easily as I can find the garbage, I can find the good stuff too, because I can decide what I block and what I mute. But this could apply to anywhere on the internet, a basic internet search. Bellingcat, one of my favorite sources of information. They are investigative journalists who dig into these issues. They're the ones who uncovered what happened in the Malaysia air shoot down and in the Skripal assassination attempt, 2014, 2018. Bellingcat did that. Christo Grozev is a Bellingcat investigator, but he also does independent investigating. Medusa in English, Russia Institute. These are just a few examples that I found in about 5 minutes. Because when you do, all of the things we look at on internet, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all the other Twitter imitators have algorithm-driven feeds that give you more of what you want. And since I want people who are more objective and more truthful and good at investigating disinformation, it comes to me. Curiously, I've got it on my phone. Right before I came here, I was looking at another site, and Bellingcat is doing, they're doing a seminar, I think, on Thursday. Thank you, Laura. Screenshot saved. This Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, or CET. Director of Research and Training will be speaking on the importance of media literacy and how Bellingcat is working to tackle disinformation. That's something I would watch. So they're out there. There are people working to combat this issue. It's not a perfect solution, but they're at least in the fight. Now, Laura, did you want me to plow ahead with the other issue, or do you want me to stop here and we talk about this?
Well, why don't you plow ahead with the other issue, and then we'll have a nice wide open Q&A.
Okay.
And I'm sure we'll get.
I'll make this part short and sweet. We're going to do something completely different now. We're going to pivot. Classified documents problem. So Laura said, why don't you talk about disinformation? Oh yeah, and at the end, throw in a bit about classified documents, because that's such a simple topic. It's not, I mean, you know, it is a simple topic. In some ways, it's very black and white. In other ways, it's very, very nuanced. But I'll try to say a few things about it, and we can use that as a launching pad for conversation if y'all want to talk about it some more. There are rules handling classified documents. My favorite rule is Executive Order 13526. It's my favorite because when I landed in that policy coordination job, my boss said, oh, by the way, you're going to be coordinating this new executive order that the Obama administration is putting out that completely rewrites the rules on how we handle classified information. And I thought, can I quit? It was ugly, let me tell you. It was a months-long slog doing battle with all the other agencies. They were standing up the director of national intelligence that was taking some of the authorities away from CIA. And so it was a question of what do you fight for and what do you roll over on, or at least compromise on. So it was a really long and complex process. But in the end, I think it came out, well, if 15 pages of bureaucratic rules are clear, you have clear guidelines about the title of it, Classified National Security Information. Who can do it? Who can undo it? How do you handle it? How long does something stay classified? How long till things can be declassified? Who can declassify? What's the process? Et cetera, et cetera. Lots and lots of rules. That's just kind of the centerpiece. For every one of these big executive orders, there's usually enabling legislation that puts it into law too. So it goes into the criminal code as well if you violate these rules in the handling of classified information. This is what happens. The Presidential Records Act, which a certain prominent politician likes to cite frequently as allowing him to store classified documents in his bathroom. There is no provision for storing classified in the bathroom or ballroom or bed or garage for that matter. Joe Biden, shame on you. So, I mean, it works both ways, but then there's the question of intent. We can get into that in Q&A if you all want to. So Presidential Records Act basically outlines how you handle classified documents during and after an administration. And the archives, National Archives, they bend over backwards to make it easy for each administration coming into the White House to handle classified properly. And there are people, one of my best friends, our daughter's godfather, was the senior director at the National Security Council for, gosh, what was his title? But he governed the distribution of classified documents in the White House. There are people there enforcing the rules, briefing the principals on the rules anytime they need, and they will tell them, no, you can't do that. That's against the rules. So you have to be interested in the rules, but they're right there for the taking. not the classified documents, the rules. You'll probably be hearing a lot in the coming weeks and months about the Classified Information Procedures Act. That's how you handle classified information in court. If this ever does go to court, and right now there's a big behind the scenes battle about how do you let the defense use classified? Do you let them use it? And if so, how? And how much do you limit it? So you've got to convince the judge that you have a compelling case to limit the amount of classified that the defendant and his team can see. So, as I said, lots and lots of rules, and most of them were broken. Want me to leave it there? Is that a good place to stop?
Sure.
Sure. Let's go to Q&A, shall we?
Very nice start. Okay,
Sorry about that.
Close to the microphone.
This one's pretty good. Hold on 1 second to get to you, because I have a question. We're gonna have a big Q&A. Mike's here for, this is, I'm just trying to talk lower. We're gonna have a big Q&A, so we're gonna get to as many questions as we possibly can, but I want to start with this. If there were so many rules, how do all these things go missing so often, apparently?
Sure. So the reality of classified information is that most of the places where you do business with classified are so-called SCIFs, secure classified information. What does the F stand for? Thank you. Yes, facility. And so the whole CIA is a SCIF. I could walk around with classified anywhere I wanted to. I could leave it on my desk at night. I didn't have to lock it in a safe at the end of it each day, like they do at State Department, like they do at the Pentagon. If you're working in a SCIF, you can leave it out. You just can't take it out without authorization. Now, let me use the example of briefing Joe Biden early in, during the transition period between the election and inauguration. He was in
I could discuss classified with him in his home, and I could leave a few documents there because he had a certified SCIF in his home. So that's part of it. And then day in, day out, during the course of an administration, it's very difficult to control the amount of hard copies of classified that exist in the universe. They are infinite. It's only the most closely guarded secrets, so-called compartmented information. You may have heard of that. SCI, secret compartmented, sensitive compartmented information, is held in very, very secure places, sometimes in standalone computers that only certain people have access to. The really sensitive stuff may be hard copy only in a safe. You have to sign for it and sit and read it in the presence of a custodian. So those are the extreme cases. Most intelligence, though, confidential, secret, even top secret intelligence goes out into the wild all the time with very few controls. And so you're counting on the integrity of the consumer to treat it properly. They should have help, and often they do, but they've got to ask for it. They've got to want it. I'll give you another good example from Joe Biden. I gave him a briefing one day on the vulnerability. Remember how, what did Obama like? The BlackBerry, thank you. Everybody in the incoming Obama administration had BlackBerries, and Obama was notorious for his love of his BlackBerry. I gave Joe Biden a briefing on the vulnerability of BlackBerries to interception, and he was flabbergasted. He had been a senator for 36 years. He didn't think about this kind of stuff. He saw classified in a skiff in the Foreign Affairs Committee that he had, but he didn't possess classified on a daily basis. But when I told him about that security risk attached to Blackberries, he said, I'm getting a briefing from my entire staff. And he said, I'm going to tell Barack too. I'm sure he got the briefing too. So I mean, that's what a responsible policymaker does. They get briefed on how sensitive this stuff is. And then it's up to them to behave with integrity. I had to go through a months-long process for a background investigation, a polygraph. But when you are elected president, vice president, when you're the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you're cleared. You get classified. Thank God, I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene gets. But that's another story. If she were on the Foreign Affairs Committee, she would get classified.
Scary.
Does that answer your question, Laura?
That's pretty scary right there. Okay, start with Ann and then we'll go over to Charlotte.
Well, you took part of my question. I was gonna ask, how did, Dummy Trump get all those secret papers out of the, when he was not reelected? How did he get them out of the White House and get them into his private residence?
My understanding is he just boxed them up, that he would frequently, his MO at his desk was something would catch his interest. He had a box by the desk. He dropped it in the box. And it could be a newspaper article. It could be a top secret report. It could be, something that a screen grab from Twitter that appealed to him. He'd drop it in the box. The boxes just got taped up willy-nilly, no rhyme or reason, no organization. It was like, here's a box of classified, here's a box of unclassified. And off they went to Mar-a-Lago. Very few people are going to tell the president that he can't do that. They should have. So if my daughter's godfather had been in the White House still when that happened, he would have thrown his body in front of the moving truck. But I suspect, and I'm pretty sure, Trump had his hand-picked minion in that role. A really young guy that they grabbed from the Pentagon. I can't remember his name. It's not important, but I think he had his guy there. So no one was going to tell him he couldn't do that. The archivist began immediately saying, okay, turn over all the presidential records, because everything the president touches is a presidential record. He had the opportunity. He was warned. His lawyers told him after he'd taken them, you need to give them back. If he had given them back, that would have been the end of it. But he didn't give it. He lied about it. I don't have them. And then they said, well, yeah, you do. We found him with a search warrant. Well, even if I do have them, I'm entitled to them under the Presidential Records Act, which is false. I mean, it's hard under the best of circumstances to say no to the most powerful person on the planet. Yeah, yeah.
What was he gonna do with these?
I cannot speak to his intention. If I understood Donald Trump well enough to explain what he intended, I would want to be checked in to a facility.
Yeah, I'm getting over here.
I don't understand. You were saying you could just leave classified information on your desk and leave it overnight?
At the CIA, yeah. In my office, my whole office was a vault. To get into my office in the morning, you had to do a combination lock. Once that clicked, you had to punch in a code on a keypad that was unique to me. And then I could go in. My badge gave me entry too. So it's like triple levels of security on top of security throughout the building. So on any given day, I could be subject to a random bag search on my way out the building. Oh, what are you doing with a bag full of classified? You can't do that.
So even anyone who get in your office had a need to know.
Yeah. Need to know. That's a phrase I should have used. It sounds almost like a throwaway, but it is a term of art. It's in Executive Order 13526 a lot. Do they have a need to know? So my jokey example before, when Joe Biden was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he had a need to know classified information. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as a member of the House Oversight Committee does not have a need to know classified.
You want it to be.
When Donald Trump was first elected, he said he and Andrew Mitchell from NBC had a conversation about his use of the expression fake news. And she said, why do you do that? Why do you call everything we're reporting fake news? And he said, if I do it long enough, people aren't going to believe you anymore.
Yeah. He often says exactly what he's gonna do. It's just so outside the norms that people don't believe it.
So is there any way to fight that sort of disinformation?
That's part of the frustrating part. I mean, and if I had the answer to that, there are millions of Americans who wouldn't passionately support Donald Trump. They have chosen to believe his version of the truth, which is objectively false in most cases. I can't explain that. I really can't. That's a really unsatisfactory answer. Maybe he's just telling them things they want to hear. But I can't explain why so many of them still have that virus. Well, they don't want to get vaccinated.
My question is this, I have a daughter who was an officer of intel in the Air Force, and her husband was as well. So when she talked about, which I didn't really know what SCIF meant, would go into those facilities or
Just shout.
they would go into a room and give a report or have those unique documents or special documents. But before they could leave the room, everything would be collected. There was an individual that had responsibility to make sure not one thing left that room. That's from your take on, I wasn't there.
Right.
Now, why I asked that question is I hear what happened with the president. He kind of has more of a higher ranking for sure. But are we still at that same level of integrity and making sure not one thing, not a note, not a document at all levels other than those that seem to have a little more discretionary right to take them? Is that still in place? Because as an American, I'd like to know that all of our secrets and everything that protect this nation and protect us all is still in place. Is that to be assumed to be correct?
I have been out for 8 years. That's hard for me to believe sometimes, but I've been out for years and things do change, but they change incrementally. They change usually in response to catastrophe. Snowden runs away with millions of, a terabyte of classified information, and we find ways to plug that hole. But others do it, and we find ways to plug that hole. So it's an ongoing process, and it's an imperfect process. And I think, again, we once we clear somebody, we depend on their willingness to adhere to the rules and on their integrity. There are mistakes all the time. True confession time. When I was a baby analyst, I was my wife can attest to this. I don't know if I was trying to impress the boss or just trying to do some extra work to get ahead of the curve. I would bring home unclassified stuff a lot of the time, and highlight speeches by Politburo members and things like that. I was a nerd. And one night I got home and I pulled out my little folder of unclassified, and the back of the staple had caught a piece of classified and brought it home with me. And so, like after I shrieked and put it back in the folder, the first thing I did the next morning was go to the security officer and confess my sin. And she said, "Oh, don't ever do that again." And I never did.
But they said if you were ever seen the paid document or anything that left the building, you could be charged and then in prison.
Yeah.
So you got a real incentive.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious.
Yeah, and I felt like I got a pretty thorough going over in the clearance process. The FBI does background investigations for the CIA, and they take it very seriously. If they can DQ somebody from the CIA, they're happy to do it because we're rivals. We're sister organizations, but we're rivals. And so I feel like I got a pretty good examination of my tawdry past. Other parts of the government maybe don't go to the same extent, and a good example of that is the, was he Air Force Air National Guard or something, that kid Teixeira, who was posting documents in a chat room on what, Reddit or something like that? Discord. Thank you. Discord, yeah. I mean, he's just showing off for his friends, but people slip through the cracks. And hopefully, they get weeded out before they do something insane like that. That guy's gonna spend a lot of time. I hope showing off to his friends was worth it, because he's going away for a long time.
Last week, Putin complained that Russia is at a disadvantage in information warfare compared to the United States, because American media, English language media, dominate the global information space. What is your response to that?
We have a ringer in the audience. Professor of Russian history. A darn good one too, by the way. I just finished his course at all. If he does it again, I recommend it. It was fabulous. I'm so distracted by that fact that I almost forgot your question. What do I think about? We have an advantage in information warfare. I think in a sense we do, but because we have so many options, we have so many media outlets. And we also have offensive capabilities that are classified, just as the Russians do, as the Iranians do, as the Chinese do. And we use them all the time. I mean, the recent attack that the Iranian proxies did on our base in Syria, that American service members. If you were listening closely, you may have heard, we're going to respond with force. At a time of our choosing, we're going to target our response, and it will include, how did they phrase it? Technical means or something like that. We're going to mess up their internet or something like that. So we have those capabilities. I agree, Professor. But I would also say we don't have the centralized direction being given to certainly not to our media. And that's, I think, the key difference between the way American media operates versus the way Russian media. But that's a great question. Thank you.
You've talked about misinformation on the internet. Would you care to comment on misinformation on cable TV?
I mean, they're cousins, right? And I think the thing that gave it away was when was it Tucker himself who was on trial for the way he was characterizing certain things, and then when they went to trial, his defense was he's not a journalist, he's an entertainer. And I think that's a key distinction that's often lost on a lot of people. You equate all the cable networks, they're all equal. It's just the slant that they bring to their coverage. So, MSNBC is viewed as diametrically opposed from Fox, but they're the same in this way of thinking. And I don't think that's true. I think you look at the people on MSNBC, they're reputable journalists with a track record. A lot of them have worked on the White House, in the White House, on the Hill, in various other places. They followed campaigns. Fox News does that too, but they are part of Fox Entertainment Network. And I think that's the difference. Others, I have to be honest, I can't watch certain cable outlets for more than a few minutes. They make me so angry. And I think that's the point. They're intended to make us angry. They make me angry because I can tell they're spewing falsehoods. They make their intended audience, their target audience, angry, so they'll be mad at people like me. And so it's the same thing, but with more video, I think, as we see on the internet. Although the internet's got plenty of video too. I prefer cat videos. Does that answer your question?
2016 election, there was a discussion about information on Facebook and so on. And the speaking said that it is possible for them to block those, to police those, but they don't want to. So is it money? Is it like they just don't care? Is there any way to persuade them or to force them to regulate them?
Our legislators like to grandstand a lot on that issue. And they could legislate, but they choose not to. For whatever reason, I assume money has something to do with it. That's it, actually, and you made me think of an example I left out during my talk on the subject of frustration with that issue and how easy it is to manipulate people online. They may deny it. I mean, you've probably had conversations with people who say, Facebook isn't going to convince me how to vote, or it's not going to change the way I think. No, but it's going to reinforce it and maybe amplify it. Anybody here ever deal with a teenager? In 2016, my niece was really excited. She had just turned 18 years old and she couldn't wait to pull the lever for Donald Trump. And the thing she kept citing as her reason was a steady diet of crap on the internet, purportedly authored by educated young women. And I would tell her, it's not an educated young woman, it's an educated young man named Ivan in Petersburg. And he works for the Internet Research Agency. She would not hear it because she was 18 and I'm an idiot. So, but good news is she flipped. She flipped. She's with an educated young man not named Ivan. And I think he opened her eyes. So it's possible.
Hi, thank you, sir. As a veteran, I am actually really intrigued and concerned about our structure of the military and how our elected officials can be part of that same military structure. So when I was in the military, it's like generals, lieutenant colonels, and everything. But we have Lindsey Graham, and we have a lot of elected officials. We have a long tradition of elected officials in the reserves, in the military that are serving, and they're picking the generals who are technically their bosses that they serve under, and they have access to information that their bosses might not even have access to. Like, could you speak to this effect? Because recently I've been having a lot of conversation about how if they're an elected official and they're within the military structure, there are certain things that they must be aware of, but there are things that has to be separated because it infringes upon the separation of our civilian government and our military infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I'm not sure I can give you a satisfactory answer because I've always been under the impression that there is, let's say somebody like Lindsey Graham, who is in the reserves, and there are, as you say, several elected officials in the House and in the Senate who are members of the reserve. And I assume they have at least an intellectual mechanism for keeping those separate. But honestly, I'm not quite sure how that works. I mean, the reserves are a part-time endeavor anyway. I'm not sure. I mean, what does Lindsey Graham do in the reserves now?
I think he's a jack-off.
Yeah.
He deals with law.
But does he get called up periodically for?
There are other.
Yeah, I just don't understand that system. So I'm really not the right guy to ask that. I'm sorry.
Okay, one last question.
Oh, hi, this is not anything, this is foreign. What are we doing to help Navalny and his operatives in other countries?
That's a good question. Now, as I said, I've been out for 8 years.
I heard that.
And if they're doing something, the reality is it would be very difficult to do anything to directly assist Navalny. He is in a work camp in the middle of nowhere, Siberia. And he's isolated. Now, here's the thing, I don't know the backstory of. He blasts out long tweets. And they're in his voice. They sound like him. And I think it's probably his team, putting it out from somewhere where they can do it freely. Because he can't be doing it from prison. There's no way they would allow him. They would never give him his smartphone in prison. So I don't know how they're doing it, but the messages are very tailored to the moment. He's responding to things in real time. So I don't know quite what that mechanism is, but if 20 years from now, if I found out it was part of an elaborate Western covert action to assist that or to create it, I wouldn't be shocked. Don't quote me on that because I know nothing. You can broaden that. He knows nothing, but I know nothing specific about that. I suspect that certainly our diplomats are in touch with these people on the outside. That should have been my answer right there, period, full stop. Mike says they're doing covert action to support Navalny.
Mike, thank you very much. That's fantastic. We gotta get. Only thing I want to say, we don't have any 50-50 today, as you guys probably noticed. The only thing I want to say is that I think we saw what happens to norms when norms aren't backed up by laws. Okay, we don't have a 50-50, so we really don't have anything else to do other than go out and start a traffic jam. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Mike for all his expertise and insight, and we'll see you next month.